Welcome and thank you for attending Ocelot's Integrated AI Chatbots webinar today, where we're going to be talking about scaling, advising, and improving access. This is part of the EDUCAUSE annual conference, and we're going to go ahead and introduce our wonderful panel here and get started. Mitch, let's start with you.
Sure. My name is Mitch Wallerstedt. I'm the Chief Operations Officer for IT Solutions, and I work for Minnesota State University, Mankato.
And I'm Rob Stirton. I'm the Vice President for Institutional Effectiveness and the CIO for the County College of Morris in Randolph, New Jersey.
Great. And my name is Paul Burke, and I am a part of Ocelot, and I'm excited to host this wonderful panel today. And we're going to kind of do this as a open format where we're going to talk to each of you and ask you about your experiences. But first, a quick tour of Ocelot, who we are as a chat solution provider. We've been in higher ed exclusively for 17 years. We are in 47, almost 50 states. And we do have the largest chatbot network within higher ed. And over the past 12 months, we've answered over 4.5 million questions through our chatbot network, of which I would say over 40% of the time they do occur after schools are closed for the day, worth noting. So let's dive in and let's hear from each of you about your experiences with respect to AI chatbot and how it's helped you right now. Rob, let's start with you and maybe kind of give a brief overview about your institution, and then maybe lead off with, how you came to be looking at chatbots as this pandemic started to really take hold in the spring.
Sure. So thank you for the invitation to be a part of this. The County College of Morris was able to stay ahead of the initial pandemic wave. We closed our campus kind of earlier than others, and we took advantage of a spring break, giving us an extra week to prepare for going virtual. We have an academic success center team that kind of needed a scalable way to engage students in the weeks and ended up being months ahead of the pandemic when it hit. And so we were not available in our offices. We were totally virtual. And Ocelot's COVID-19 bot was a wonderful solution for us as we tried to respond and think through how we were going to operate moving forward. And it was just a great response to the COVID-19 situation by a trusted higher education partner. It was immediately useful. It required minimal resources and helped our students and their parents kind of find the answers to the questions they were asking related to the college functions during the beginning of the pandemic. And, it came to at a time when we really desperately needed this type of free resource. So my kudos to Ocelot. It really was a beneficial tool for us as we began that journey. It ended up being more than a couple of weeks as COVID-19 pandemic hit. We really looked to Ocelot's chatbot to help us through that beginning of the time for the pandemic.
And Rob, when you were putting together the chatbot and trying to get it deployed, can you talk about the process your institution took to trying to gather, how did you identify the answers to put in? Did you already have a central location and you just copied it over, or talk through maybe some of the learning moments that you had initially with a chatbot solution?
So, the chatbot, the speed of the launch and the value of the partnership was pretty evident with how easy the tool was to use in the support we got from the Ocelot team. We had the benefit of improving our answers by having to write them down, which led to reducing people's service demand on the offices already overwhelmed kind of with the change. So to have a framework of the questions that we might be asked provided by Ocelot allowed us to kind of be more thoughtful in our chatbot responses. And it was useful for our academic success center staff as well, because they really had to think about what do I want to convey to the student and or their parents? And here are a set list of questions that we may be asked. So it was tremendously beneficial to have that framework going into the initial start to the pandemic.
That's exciting to hear, because it sounds like any assistance, not just from a technology standpoint, but just from a framework and process standpoint, right, to help organize your thoughts and how you're going to answer specific questions that come in. That's pretty powerful. So that's kind of what took place, I guess, at the initial stage of COVID coming out, having an immediate need, using the free COVID chatbot solution that we came out with at that time. Talk maybe about what transpired once you went live. Once other members of your institution saw what you're doing. What was that feedback like?
So it was wonderful. We actually used the analytics to look at some of the questions that were being asked of the chatbot. What we discovered pretty quickly was we were actually considered more than just a trusted source in a community college for students to go to. They were asking us, what are the symptoms of the pandemic and the COVID-19, and some really questions that made us realize we have a value to the students that's kind of a first source of information. And so we kind of use the chatbot to kind of be a proof of concept, if you will, to broaden the, kind of test it out, see how a chatbot would work for us, and then broaden it to the full chatbot that we're going to be implementing here in the future with Ocelot. So that proof of concept was pretty important for us. And I would just say, when I see a product that's designed specifically for end users to easily stand up, it's intuitive, it's comprehensive, it allowed us to maintain it with minimal workload effort, and it was really well supported with forward-thinking vendor team. The value of that partnership with that organization became pretty obvious to us. So we're in the process of moving to the full chatbot across all of our departments. It's much broader, and it'll be much more meaningful to the students. And I would just say, ultimately, the chatbot's a student success tool, and that's the way we're looking at it. It allows students and their parents to get the answers to questions they need when they need them, which will help students succeed and continue their academic progress towards a degree. So it removes one of the barriers that they have in their path, and therein lies the value and the ROI from our standpoint.
And was that pretty self-apparent? I mean, was that a pretty easy conversation to have with your fellow leaders at your institution? Or what were some of the things that you kind of had to present out to say, this is how we see the effectiveness? Was it more data driven? Was it more just, this is a pretty obvious win for us? Or kind of what was your administration looking for to get out of a solution like this that led to ultimately the decision to go, campus wide?
So, when you look at the records of when students were calling the offices, it became pretty apparent that we needed a solution that was around available and around when they were making those phone calls or had those needs for information. So using the data and the information that way, it became pretty self-evident that we needed to have some kind of tool that allowed us to be open more hours than our offices and people were going to allow. So we used the data and the experience of the COVID-19, and I'll be honest with you, it was very easy convince to the vice presidents and the administration that this was just a no-brainer. We really needed to do this, and because the CARES funding was available, that made it just that much more reasonable to move it forward in a more quick format than maybe we would have in any other situation. So having the COVID-19 bot really did work as the proof of concept, like I was hoping it would work.
Got it. So you went into it with that mindset, and that's kind of what brought the process along, kind of proved the concept. That makes sense. I'm glad you brought up CARES funding, because we have a number of schools, and more every week, coming to us looking to utilize those funds, and you weren't alone in that regard. Can you speak to just kind of, how that came about, how your institution, identified those funds to be potentially used for a solution like this, and what that process looked like, or that conversation looked like at your institution?
So as I mentioned, we look at this as a student success tool, and the ability for them to get the answers they need when they need them, to help them continue along in their successful journey and the academic progress. When we saw that, we thought that's what CARES funding is supposed to be used for, is to help student success while we're virtual. And this tool just fits perfectly with the expectations of CARES funding and our own framework and priorities put on student success.
Mm-hmm. Got it. That makes total sense, and it seems like a pretty clear association to the purpose of the funds for an application like this. So I think what you are doing fits in line with what we're hearing every day. So thanks for expanding on that. Is there anything else, Rob, that you want to touch on during this time that might be relevant before we switch over to Mitch?
I would just say that the experience of the COVID-19 chatbot and how well supported we were really made it an easier sell, if you will, to the cabinet. That this is a company that we can trust to be helpful in building this chatbot out. It could be a daunting process if we didn't have the tools and the framework and the questions and how to approach the answers for every one of the departments we're going to be using with the full chatbot. Without that support and that framework, it would have been a little more challenging to get the cabinet to agree to that. But having all of that in place and making it so easy for us to immediately stand up really is the benefit of Ocelot's chatbot. It's not only good for the students and their parents, but it's also good for the institution from a workload effort. You guys made it very simple for us. And then to have the funding through CARES, it just, like I said, it was a no-brainer.
That's great to hear, and that's kind of our philosophy with our origins in publishing. We view it as, the technology is really an empty bucket. It's only going to add value with what you put in it, right? And if we can help you fill that bucket anywhere from 70 to 90% of the way in each of those departments and continue to add content, I think that was one of the big and excellent, horrible example, I like to say, is the pandemic, right? Because in COVID-19 alone, we've added over 1,000 new pieces of questions and answers to the knowledge base libraries that are school customizable. And then due to CARES Act and additional ones that are probably coming down the pipeline soon, we also go back through existing content and update it as regulations impact those things. So I'm glad, it's exciting to hear someone on the who's just kind of getting started with us to identify that early on, and that your cabinet was able to see that value too, because that's really what we're trying to do, is alleviate that burden as much as possible, right? And make this truly a low maintenance turnkey solution as much as possible. So,
and you guys have done an excellent job on that. The last thing I would say is our ability to brand it the way we wanted to brand it with our mascot and really make it our own is important for us, especially given the shrinking market for students. So it's just a complete total package, well thought out and well executed. We're just glad that we're starting the journey of actually implementation. So
great, wonderful. Thanks so much, Rob. Appreciate your time and your insights. As always, we are looking forward to growing this partnership many years to come.
Us too.
Mitch, you are a more, I guess, a mature client that you've been with us for a while now, and you have actually had a similar expansion story where you started in one department and now you're moving into others. If you don't mind kind of giving us a brief overview about, your role, your institution, and then maybe we can dive in to some of the themes that you want to talk about.
Sure. Yeah. So from my role's perspective, I oversee our kind of three areas within our IT shop. As the chief operations officer, I oversee our project management, our business analysis, and kind of the business relationship management. So looking at from a service portfolio perspective, making sure our services line up with the needs and objectives of our different business units and academic colleges across the institution. So the staff that work for me, their role is to make sure that they're understanding what the needs and objectives are of the leaders across the institution, kind of understanding where they're heading and making sure that the services that we provide as an IT unit really align with where the institution is going, and whether it's services that we're providing or the projects that we're working on, really allow and enable those objectives. So one of the initiatives are cabinet level projects that was already on the books before the pandemic started was looking at a chatbot type of solution as a student success initiative. It's something that we're working with the VP for student success, as a high level stakeholder, but the pandemic certainly accelerated the timeline around this. The story or kind of the evolution of this is very similar to what Rob was talking about, looking at getting that buy-in and looking at the chatbot really being an enabler for student success across the institution and allowing for students and families to find a way to get the answers that they need kind of wherever they're coming from, regardless of time of day, geographic location, and really wanting to make sure that we're enabling them to be successful in their interactions with our institution, no matter what division or department that they're trying to work with. Our initial kind of interaction or kind of starting point with Ocelot really was in financial aid. And we had started working with Ocelot around the financial aid support videos. And that's kind of how we started working with your group. And in our relationship with the institution and kind of understanding kind of how each of the units work, that's kind of how Ocelot as a vendor and some of the solutions that you offer kind of percolated up as looking at, okay, what do we have in place and what could we rapidly expand and scale to meet some of the very short-term needs that we have as all of the staff are starting to move to remote work, as we are moving, like Rob was talking about, we had a very similar situation over the spring break, and used our spring break to prepare for the remote learning, work with our faculty to transition their classes to online and remote, to transition our staff and student services to a remote service type of offering. So we were looking at, okay, what are the service offerings that we have? What are the products that we have in place? And Ocelot became a very a very quick and appealing option for us to look at accelerating the chatbot initiative that we already had on our roadmap, but accelerating it in a very, very quick way.
It's interesting you say that because that's something that I've heard from many IT leaders over the past 6 months is an AI chatbot went from being a nice to have, maybe in the top 20 priorities over the next 24 months, to being a need to have in the next 6 months or sooner, as soon as we can get it spooled up, given the level of accessibility, the virtualization now, the remote learning, remote support. Is that kind of what was going on your end too? Did it jump in the priority mix?
Yeah, it definitely jumped. So our initial roadmap, we were looking at doing some kind of investigation and looking at piloting over the next year period. So right now is probably when we would have been looking at partners to start looking at rolling out and doing some initial piloting. But that timeline became very condensed. So instead of having some of those initial conversations, now is like I said, when we would have been doing it, it became a matter of just a couple weeks that we started identifying partners. Like I said, our financial aid group had already been using it just for their own departmental needs. But then we started saying, okay, it's working well for them. Who are other targets? And because we were very focused around that student success and how can we improve the journey and the interaction for our students, we identified it. Okay, well, let's look at our advising group. We want to look at admissions, the registrar, and residential life. So those are the areas that we expanded it to as part of that pandemic response. So over a shortened period of about 3 or 4 weeks, we quickly pulled them in and looked at the use of the existing libraries that were already in place within Ocelot, and then taking from existing kind of legacy CRM knowledge bases that we already had on campus, to kind of flesh out and bring in that additional kind of institutional context to very quickly spin that up.
And with that regard, I mean, how has that been going for you all? Is it, I mean, because this is something where I feel like, and I worked at a school and I came from my IT, so it was always the concept of, it'd be nice if we had third shift covered.
Yeah.
But most of us don't. But the AI chatbot, it never sleeps. So is that something that was, I guess, part of that, decision process when looking at solutions, saying, just forget vendors for a moment, but just the concept of it as a whole, the AI chatbot, is that a big win for you all?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a big win for us, for being able to, like I said, meet the students where they are, right? So not try to kind of artificially define when students ought to be seeking support or seeking assistance to the answers that they need, and providing at least that first level of support. So we've branded, like a lot of institutions have, we've branded the chat bot around our mascot. So our solution is called Ask Stomper. Stomper is our mascot, and we're so when you go to the chat bot, you interact with Ask Stomper, and at least gives you that first tier of support for answers around advising or admissions, the registrar's office. So if you have questions about how to register for a course or your financial aid type of issues, it's worked so well that at this point we have already started looking at expansion across the institution. So we're expanding those libraries institution wide now, and we'll be expanding so that chatbot experience is available on all of our public facing web pages.
I have it pulled up here. There it is, Stomper.
Yep.
24/7. That's great. I love the name.
Yep.
Steal these ideas, Rob. You guys have done it before, but now you get a world to choose from when it comes to names. They're as unique as you get.
Yeah. The other thing that we're doing is taking from this, we're part of the kind of reality that we're living in right now is because so many of our student support services have had to move to kind of this virtual realm, is we're using this Ask Stomper, and using the chat bot is kind of that first tier, that front door to a lot of our student experiences now. So we're moving to more of a kind of one-stop type of model for a lot of our student support services, with that eye on student success, because we can no longer just say, this issue that you're coming to us for really is a registrar issue, or it's really a res life issue. You have to go to their office. That's not the world we're living in right now. So we have to enable those types of interactions in a different way to really meet the needs of students. So this overall initiative is being kind of branded under an extension of that Ask Stomper concept.
Interesting. That's a great way to keep the branding and the value consistent across the board, right? So
Yep.
that way, in the student's mind, this is just, hey, I'm just getting my needs
Yep.
met, right? Regardless
Exactly.
of how.
Yep.
Okay.
And that's the whole goal, right? Is we want to give students that consistent experience. So regardless of where they go, they're getting that assistance that they need.
Got it. Okay. Wonderful. I do want to pose a question to both of you since I have you here. But before I do, Mitch, is there anything else that you want to cover with respect to your process through this whole COVID journey, whether it's with Ocelot or the AI chatbot initiative? Before I turn it over to both of you.
I think Rob talked a lot about this already, but I think, yeah, just understanding what it is you're trying to accomplish is huge here, and really focusing the rollout of the chatbot around meeting the needs of your students, and having that student success being the lens through which you're looking as you're rolling this out, and using that to really inform the decisions that you're making about how you go about this. Where you're targeting, which groups you're rolling it out to, and how you're making your design decisions. I think that's really critical for how successful you're going to be.
Yep, absolutely. Always know where you want the end result to be, right? And measure against it.
Yep.
So we only have a few moments left, and once again, I want to thank you both. I just had a question, since I have two senior leadership roles on the call here at prominent institutions. How has your role or your type of role, operationally and from IT, how has that evolved over this pandemic? I think that would be interesting to hear, because I'm sure it has changed. And I'm opening up to both of you. So, I just want to get your take on that. How has your type of role evolved over this pandemic? Whether it's maybe you went from more, compliance and tactician to strategic to, or holistic, whatever it may be. But, and if it hasn't, it hasn't. But I'm just kind of curious.
So this is Rob. I'll answer that one. So my role is a little different than a typical CIO. I'm really about the data that's inside of the technology and how we use that and leverage that to help guide student success. So what's changed in the 6 months is the demand for the data. We have a data warehouse. We've built it. It's a single source. It's got the student life cycle, from admissions to alumni. But the quantity and of the data that's being asked to help guide the decisions is really impressive. It's wonderful to see the college embrace the use of data. So I would say the quantity and variety of data, breadth and depth, kind of has evolved in just the 6 short months since we went on this journey, because they really want to make those decisions in the best interest of the students. So that's how I would answer that question, Paul. Great question.
Interesting. That's exciting to hear. That's impressive. Mitch, what about you?
Yeah, I think over the last 6 months, the pandemic response is really emphasized the importance of my role and technology leaders in higher ed, kind of generally, of really being a strategic partner with the institution. You talked about the being a tactician, right? Being versus being a leader within the organization. Sometimes it can be easy for folks within IT to kind of put on that technical advisor hat and talk about what's going on through that compliance filter, or talk about what's going on through that filter of, well, this is what we can do from a technical perspective, this is what we can't do through a technical perspective, but really understanding what it is we're trying to accomplish, what the mission of the organization is, what the goals of the stakeholders that you're working on are, and partnering with folks to accomplish those goals. I think understanding that overall context, and working with folks to accomplish those goals through technology or technological interventions, or process improvement, but in partnership to get where they want to go is really been kind of emphasized during this period.
Absolutely. Thanks for letting me spring a couple extra ones on you, gentlemen. I appreciate both your time. We did use up our 30 minutes, which was great. I just want to say thank you to everyone that is watching this webinar and this session. I'd especially like to thank you, Rob, and you, Mitch, for your valuable insights and input. If anyone is interested in learning more about Ocelot, or any of the additional thought leadership articles and webinars that we do provide and host on a regular basis, feel free to reach out to us via the email listed on the screen. You can also visit us at our website, ocelotbot.com, to schedule a demo and learn more. That's it for now. My name is Paul. Rob, Mitch, thank you so much for your time once again.
Be safe, stay well.
Take care, gentlemen. I hope everybody has a great rest of their EDUCAUSE conference.